Like, all right, cool. Um, okay, great. Can you hear me and everything's good?
I can hear you, Dalton. Hello.
How's it going, Bessie? How are you?
It's going really well today. How are you doing, Dalton?
I'm doing great, thank you. So we were talking a little bit before this, but I kind of want to jump right into it because I feel like there's a lot of cool things we can talk about around what you're doing. So tell us like everything that you have going on, like business wise, um, and all the projects you have going on.
Oh my goodness. I am like the project queen. I don't know if we want to talk about all of them, but let's
Oh,
feature
whatever, whatever,
just a
whatever you
couple.
want to talk about. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I am the maker at Merkabody. Merkabody is a play off of the Merkaba. Merkaba means light body spirit. And so what we are doing is we are creating intentional products using ingredients that are not well known to the collective consciousness yet. So we're using cannabinoids, we're using shilajit, ormus, guayusa, we're using other of the earth's medicines that are just sitting around for us. So we have even like a
Mm-hmm.
juniper tonic that you could use. And
Mm-hmm.
so we are creating those and we are just looking for women like badass boss babes, women who want to embody their powerhouse self and just need to feel more energy, need to feel more focus, need just to feel better. They can be their best selves and get out there and do the things they need to do in life for themselves and for all the people they love.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I like that. So you've got a few things going on, and I kind of want to talk about, because I mean I go here with all of my guests, but it seems it seems pertinent right now to like kind of go into how you got into this. And the question I want to start off with is really like, you mentioned that the medicines and that you're using aren't people aren't aware of them, like the collective consciousness isn't aware of them yet. And I'm kind of curious how you think we got to this point
how we
of
got to
of
the
what
point.
of like why they're not recognized and why they're kind of, because I dealt in CBD and it was like almost shunned.
Yeah, and that's a huge can of worms you're going after there. Let's get into that.
Well, yeah, I know.
Well, where do we start? I would say that this is just ancient wisdom, ancient
Yeah.
medicine. This is the stuff that our great grandmothers would go into the forest and collect and take care of the children and keep them alive and well.
Hmm.
And somewhere along the way, we ran into Western medicine, which is fantastic. Man, if I am bleeding or cut open or have a broken bone, that's the first place I'm going to go. I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to be like, please set my bone. Please
Yeah.
sew me up. But when it comes to all of these other ailments that we have, the earth just grows everything that we need. These plants are medicine, and we can literally go out and eat them and utilize them and heal ourselves. So, to
Hmm.
answer your question, I think the way we ended up in this space is because we as a society and maybe as no, I guess as a society has just bought into what we have been told is the way to go. I
Hmm.
might be in a unique position where going to the doctor is kind of the my last step. I try to do
Hmm.
everything else to take care of myself or my family before I run to the doctor and say like, okay, what's going on? What happened? And because of that, I don't really have a medical history, where
Yeah.
most people
Yeah.
have been trained the second something's wrong, go to your doctor and they'll take care of you. And it's not that there's quite anything wrong with that. I just think that somewhere along the line, we lost our connection to our own intuition, and we're kind of giving our power away to somebody else to tell us how we should be instead of listening to our own knowing and learning about these different plant medicines and kind of taking the power into our own hands to take care of our own health and wellness.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something. I agree with almost everything. I mean everything really, because I just feel like I definitely agree with like the Western versus like Eastern medicine side of things, right? Um,
Yeah.
because it's just different, right? Like I agree with you that Western medicine is perfect. Like we need. I mean, I'm glad that we live in America, right? Um, but I also agree like that people just like we've kind of lost that. Like we've kind of been like, oh, this kind of holistic approach to like health, that the earth did take care of us for so long, and
Mhm.
she didn't forget about us.
Right.
They're still there to help us. Because I agree. Like I feel, and my whole message to people whenever it's brought up, like this holistic approach or whatever, is like nothing's off the menu. That's what I
Mhm.
think, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so it's just super important. So how did you come up with like, what made you want to turn this into a business idea? What made you want to turn this into your, kind of like your purpose and what you're doing right now?
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Um, well, it actually started out with my son when he was about 16 years old. So this was a handful of years ago.
Okay.
And he came to me and he's like, Mom, I want to try CBD oil. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, well, I have anxiety and my friends, they're using CBD and it helps. And I'm like, son, that is wonderful. Tell me what your friends are using. Send me those companies. I'll do the research. And he knows
Yeah.
I'm the type of mom that's going to look into, the sourcing, like where is it coming from? What's the integrity behind the product? What's the
Hmm.
potency? How's it grown? Is it
Hmm.
organic? Is it non-GMO? Like, can we make sure there's no heavy metals or pesticides in this? And, at the time, there was only a couple of companies in the whole United States that kind of fit my bill. And oh, they were expensive.
Yeah,
So
I can only.
I,
What companies were they?
I don't even remember. It was
Do you
so long
remember?
ago.
Okay, okay, that's
No,
fair.
and not
That's
at
fair.
all, not at all. But what I did find out is, yeah, there was a lot of banditos out there. There was a lot of
Yeah.
companies out there that were just out to make money, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
money is a byproduct of it's almost like a reward. It's like a byproduct of what you put out. It's the energy that comes back in. And
Hmm.
what I've definitely learned in my life is that you can spend your energy doing good in the world and having that green energy come back to you, or you can kind of be devious and maybe make a few bucks along the way, but that is
Yeah.
not sustainable.
No, it's
um
not.
yeah, it's not. And so that's kind of where the idea started, is the fact that, like, mother of necessity, right, is like, my son needed something. I wasn't willing to pay that much for it. Because of my past, I know how to source, I know how to talk to people, I know how to make
Mm.
those connections. So I just went and found the people I wanted to work with, the farm. I went and found the farm. I went and created my own formulas. I utilized my friends, some of my therapist and doctor friends, actual MDs and other kind of like holistic doctors, like chiropractors and whatnot, and asked
Yeah.
them to take the formulas that I created, test them on their patients, so I could kind of be like a blind study, so I wouldn't really know who
Hmm.
are having kind of influence with them. And they all picked up one formula. Everyone loved this one formula, and I'm like, okay, we're set to go. And then from there, of course, I was like, well, I've been making Ormus for over a decade, so why wouldn't I offer that to people? And I love Shilajit, and a friend of mine locally here found Shilajit in the mountains, so I'm not having to import it from India. And so I was like, well, no one's putting like cannabinoids in Shilajit, so what happens if you do that? Does that turn into something? And
Yeah.
it did. So that's kind of how it started. It was just kind of like, I like to make things. That's where I shine. I'm like a formulator. So I'm like, I like to make things and I like to take things and
Yeah.
see how it affects your body,
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that's incredible. Holy cow. So you mentioned that you mentioned that you started to, it's very entrepreneurial, right? I don't want to pay for this much. There's got to be an easier way to do this. You said because of my past, you knew how to do these things. Tell me more about that.
Well, for the last 12 years, myself and another business partner, we created a company named Asita. And Asita means gratitude in the language Twi, which is
Okay.
spoken by the Ashanti in Ghana, Africa.
Hmm.
And so we started importing this beautiful honey. It's dark, rich honey. It actually doesn't even taste like the honey we're used to here in the United States. It's
Yeah.
it's just like more gourmet. I call it medicinal gourmet. And
Okay.
yeah, so we just started we
Okay.
started importing that. We also have shea butter that's coming out of Africa. And when you embark on a project where you're like, I'm going to go to Africa and I'm going to create a beekeeping co-op and bring this beautiful honey to the States and to the world, you kind of learn how to source. You kind of
Yeah.
learn all
Yeah.
pieces that you have to do to create a brand and create marketing and create all of those things. So it was kind of like when I needed a CBD solution for my son, I was like, oh, I know how to do this and it's fun. And the
Yeah.
one thing I can say is now that I have this business where I do have some CBD products, I can go back to my mom and say, see, Mom, you can make money selling cannabinoids. You can do it. And here I am.
Did she say, did she say you couldn't?
Maybe sometime in my past when I was a teenager and maybe up to bad things.
I was gonna say, I think you've always been able to make money with cannabinoids.
You sure can.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, dude. That's fun. That's really cool. That's really fun though. I like that. I love honey. I know that's
Me too.
random, but you brought up honey, and I'm like, honey
Mhm.
is like super awesome. I think for more reasons than just it tastes good. But when you said honey, it just reminded me of like we found some like organic honey here in Utah, and I'll never buy honey from the store ever again. There is something special about like there is really something special, and I guess to bring it full circle, there's really something special about knowing that like this is from the earth, that it's there to take care of you. I know, and it's so crazy. Like if you'd have known me a few years ago, like that me would not be saying this stuff. You know what I mean? But my whole view has changed on like how the earth can take care of us, and how it's like she's like designed to take care of us. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Isn't
And
it
yeah,
beautiful?
it is
Isn't
beautiful.
it,
It
isn't
really
it
is.
beautiful that you've allowed yourself the space to
Oh,
grow into who you are today? That's
yeah, and hopefully it keeps going. But and I'm sure it will. So, but it's just interesting. So you get into Asita, and
Mhm.
I'm just curious what's even further back than that. Like take us all the way back, I guess. Like what made you want to go
Are you like
get this?
talking like 6 years old, like my first business? Is that like
Oh,
what
it
you're
was it 6 years old? Was that your first business?
It was, it
What'd
was.
you do?
I lived in a very rural town in Nevada, and
Okay.
I was obsessed with rocks. I would collect
Okay.
rocks and shine them up, and I had set up a little booth like a lemonade stand, but it was a rock stand on the side of my dirt road. And I have to tell you, not one car stopped that summer. Not one car even stopped, let alone did I make one sale.
That's
And
bad juju.
I know,
That's
right?
bad
Always
juju.
stop for the lemonade stand, kids.
Yes, you
But
do.
no one stopped. You know, it was a different time, and I guess they just weren't interested in what that kid was doing on the side of the road. That's fine. What I find interesting about it, though, is instead of it kind of being I don't know, something that kind of held me back.
Yeah.
I just thought all those people were crazy for not stopping because these rocks were beautiful. And I was like, you don't want my rocks? That's fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
We'll move on. By the next summer, I was on to other things, not so much trying to hustle. But no, I've always had some kind of side hustle, some kind of business happening on
Uh-huh.
the side. Before Asita, I actually was in corporate America for a long time. I was a sales
Okay.
trainer for bankers. So I
Oh, a sales trainer for bankers.
bankers aren't
Okay.
very good salespeople.
No, they're not. They're actually terrible.
Yeah. So it
I
was
would
my
beat
job.
bankers all the time.
It was my job to train like the teller to the president of the bank on how to sell their financial products. So
Yeah.
I did that for a really long time. And then with the 2008 crash, that job kind of disappeared. And I looked
Yeah.
around and I was like, gosh, what am I going to do? And all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, someone came up to me and said, hey, do you want to start a company selling honey from Ghana, Africa? And I'm like, yeah, I do. So that was that. And
All
then
right.
before that, it was just always like working for startup companies and trying to get their feet off the ground and making them money. And at some point in time, it just kind of clicked that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the energy, I'm the value, I'm the one that can do all of this. So I might as well, find something that I'm really passionate about and see how many people I can help bring out their inner light and make them feel like you're the one, you're the value, you're the
Mm-hmm.
person that can go out there and do these things that you want to do. And you know what? The world needs you to step up and do it right
Yeah.
now. Now is the
Yeah.
time to get out there and do that. So how can I help you feel better so that you can go out and do these things you want to do. And so that's
Yeah.
just kind of where I'm at now.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really interesting though, because I feel like we have a very similar story because I even though I'm still in sales, like I have a few businesses, but I still like the day-to-day sales gig. There is something for me as a salesperson being on a sales floor with a bunch of my peers and really hammering out sales. That's really fun for me.
I love it. It is. It's like it's exciting. There's like an
Yeah, it
energy
is.
there, that feeds on itself, and you can feed on
Yeah.
them, and they feed on you, and yeah, it
Yeah, and
feels
it's just
good.
like it's
Yeah.
great. Because yeah, I trained I was a sales trainer for quite a while. And it's so funny that you brought up banks because I was in the when I was a trainer, I was in the automotive industry, and we would compete with banks all the time,
Mm,
like sell. So not everything that they sold in banks, but like some of their other insurances that banks
yeah.
would sell for like automotive stuff. And it's always funny. Like we'd always go back and forth with the banks. Like we had to be their friend, and we also had to try to outsell them, and that was a
Yeah.
very interesting dynamic.
It is an interesting dynamic, and I mean, at least you didn't have to deal with what I dealt with.
I
After
can
the
only imagine.
recession for years, people were like, "Oh, you were in banking, so this is your fault." And I'm like,
Oh
"Well,
yeah, that's weird.
no, I wasn't really in banking. I was just training the banks." So, I guess we all play our part, either for good or for bad, right? So,
Sure, yeah. Yeah, seriously, you're like, I don't know. Yeah, call it whatever you want. Like I was in car sales, everybody still thinks I'm like those guys are right next to lawyers. I was just talking
oh,
about this the other night. You know what I mean? Like car salespeople are like right next to lawyers. So I got out of that. But anyway, that's really cool. So you were with startups, you end up with banks, and then you get this. You're kind of. It's almost like it sounds like it's almost like you're kind of pushed into this like entrepreneurial life that you've been set up for. And the reason I kind of brought up sales is because if that's kind of the same thing, it's like sales really sets you up to be like an entrepreneur because you got half the battle already won if you know how to sell something.
yeah. And I think the thing that's interesting about sales, like I love sales. I
Hmm.
love people who sell things. And because the fact of the matter is, nothing happens without sales. Like you
Oh,
go
for
and buy
sure.
a loaf of bread at the grocery store, that didn't get there unless someone sold it to that store. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like nothing,
Yeah.
nothing moves and nothing happens without sales. And I think it's kind of silly that people are kind of down on salespeople because realistically everybody's a salesperson. I mean, even if you're like a massage
Sure.
therapist, you're
Sure.
selling yourself, you're selling your product, you're selling your service, and
Yeah.
you put yourself out there and you have to sell. So,
Yeah.
I love salespeople. I think they're great.
Well, funny enough, like it's funny that you brought up massage therapy. I've been doing this podcast for a really long time, almost 2 years, and at the beginning I met with I interviewed her name is Alyssa, and she has a mobile like she's like a mobile chiropractor, and her
Was it
niche is
Alyssa
for
Evans?
no, her last name is I think she's getting married, but her last name
Oh,
is
okay.
Coons when I interviewed her.
Oh my goodness. I
Um,
was like, I thought you were talking about one of my very best friends in the wide world. I was like,
Oh
what?
yeah, I would have been like that would have been really cool.
Please, please
But she
continue on with this, Alyssa.
yes, I know. But she like ended up coming back and we talked a little bit after the podcast about sales, like because she was trying to like sell her services and she's like, I didn't think it'd be this hard. And I'm like,
Mm,
well, yeah, like me either. But like,
right.
it does. It's like sales, you have to like know how to talk to people. And it's not about like people think like sales is like we're coming from like I have to sell you this thing, but persuasion and influence is more about us really trying to help you, like to help people. And that's why like I don't believe sales trainers who say I can you bat 100%, right? Like you should be able to sell everybody that you talk to. Cause like, it's just not realistic for me because some people aren't ready for it. Like I'm sure you've run into some people who just aren't ready for like the CBD world.
It's interesting. I have. I with one of my mentors said I should do a farmer's market. So this last season, I engaged in a farmer's market, and it was interesting. I
Yeah.
I had all the different, all the different products, and either people literally didn't see it, it wasn't even in their sphere, they didn't understand, or people would like see it and automatically like, be like, Zoom, I'm in. Like, what is this? Tell me
Yeah.
about it. I want this. Like, basically like, tell me how this is going to help me. But it was
Yeah.
interesting. It was like this like weird vibrational thing where if people weren't on that vibration, it didn't even exist in their world. It's like my booth was blank and they just walked
Yeah.
by because it wasn't even there in their
Yeah.
consciousness, And so it was
Yeah.
interesting to see the different people who kind of were like that, and the other people who were just like Zoom, right there, right in it. And then
Like
other people
CBD,
who
I'm
like
in.
noticed it and was like, ooh, I'm really curious. And then their questions and what they needed to know and what would help them. And it
Right.
was a cool experience, but interesting to
Yeah.
see that the whole idea of everything really is a vibration. And if you're on
Mm.
a certain vibe, there may be people that don't even see you. Like, you can walk by them and you don't even exist to them because the
Yeah.
vibrations are so far apart that they you just don't register. And I
Yeah.
saw that in real time with this farmers market. And I was like, well, this is really
Yeah.
cool. I'm glad I experienced this. Not my market, won't be doing it again, but
Right. Right.
cool
Right.
experience.
Well, yeah, I notice that happens. I mean, I kind of want to talk to you about. I want to have you kind of explain like vibrations, because I've had like four people explain it to me, and I'm like, I kind of get it. But it's funny though, because I understand like when you say that, like people, like you're not even on their radar. I do understand that, because to me, like that sounds like when people, like politics is one of them, or like when people critique like celebrities. I'm like, why are you guys critiquing these celebrities? Like, they don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
Like, do you, like, we're talking crap about celebrities who like don't even know we exist. They don't even know your name. They don't even, you know what I'm saying? So to me,
Yeah.
it's like why waste my energy on like some negative criticism to somebody who's, and it might be like vibration, but that's kind of how it makes sense in my head. Like, why would I waste my time negatively criticizing something that I'm like, they don't even know who I am.
Right.
Like,
So it's like what
and
you're
and if
attracted
they weren't
to.
on, yeah, and if they weren't on TV, I wouldn't know who they are.
Right. Right. So it's like what you're attracted to. So,
Yeah.
obviously, I obviously just met you, but it seems like you're attracted to ideas, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, maybe ideas are here, and it's not that vibrations are better or worse or higher or lower. They're just different. It's almost like
Hmm.
um, music, like the different tones of music, right? Like, you
Yeah.
have like a C vibrating here, and then you have like an E major here, and
Mm.
they may not harmonize, but they're different vibrations. But then once you get the E right in the right harmonization, then then they'll start harmonizing together, right? So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
so for you, it's like you're attracted to ideas. That's where your vibration is. You're like, ooh, ideas. We want to talk about ideas, and then maybe another
Yeah.
vibration is like, ooh, let's be really gossipy and talk about people and talk about these celebrities and talk about how horrible things are. And let's watch the news and let's like fill our mind with all of these things that keep making me feel this certain way, which may be, I don't know, like people who watch too much news, like, maybe in like this, like, almost like hyper state of fear, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
they keep like gravitating towards these things that keep feeding this vibration of like a hyper state of fear, and then you have people that are just like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of that. I want things that feel good. So I'm on this different vibration where I'm feeding my body and my mind and my spirit and my mental intuition with things that make me feel good and make me feel better. And so for you, I
Yeah.
think it's ideas. Like, I'm the same. I like ideas too. I'm like, ooh, yeah, let's talk about ideas. I get some
Right.
kind of like high off of like, ooh, what can we do? And yeah, let's do this and that. And even if it never comes to anything, it's like, we're putting the idea out there.
Yeah.
And great. And that feels better to me than like sitting there on the fear wagon and, talking about whatever celebrity because they did whatever, so that
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
night and day of vibration.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, because and in fact, it's funny. I was just talking about I was talking to someone about this earlier, of like just being creators. Like, if you're a creator, it
Mhm.
doesn't, yeah, it doesn't really matter if it comes to fruition or not, because in a creator's mind, if it's on paper and we went through the process of doing it, even if it never like brought me money or like became an actual business that I started, I created something little right there and it was cool. And it just reminds me that I have the juice left. You know what I mean? I got something flowing, you know what I'm saying? So I
Yeah,
can
it like
throw that one out and go
creates
on to the next one.
oh yeah, it creates like some kind of chemical in your brain. Maybe it's dopamine or something. You get like a little dopamine rush
Yeah.
and then you feel really good. You know, I don't know what chemical
Yeah.
it's creating, but maybe it's that. And then you're just like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it kind of keeps you going. You know,
Yeah.
another thing to think about with that, and maybe this has happened to you, is when you do this sort of creating, even if you're not the one that brings it to fruition,
Hmm.
eventually it comes out into the consciousness. Have you ever had that, Dalton, where you've thought about something or
Hmm.
you've talked about something and then a few years later it's been invented or it's like out there for sale
Oh
and
yeah,
you're like,
all the time.
what?
Yeah, all
Yeah,
the
it's like,
time. Or yeah. Oh, well, that happened with our CBD company. So I thought we got into the CBD game kind of early-ish. Like we were
mhm,
right at the hype when we created this business. Um, and I what we wanted to do, well, it was funny because we found out we sourced out some product, white labeled it. You know, they were white labeling it. It was really good. Um, and I was like, I was looking at the margin. So I'm an accountant by trade. Like
okay,
that's what I went to school for. It helps
cool.
me in sales. Like so I'm looking at these numbers and I'm going like, we're comparing to these big guys. We're trying to figure out a pricing model. We're trying to figure out how we're going to price this and brand this. And we end up pricing it lower. And I'm like, we were the first, at least in Utah, where you could buy like a really potent CBD bottle, um,
Mhm,
for like that was affordable. You know that you could actually like justify if this 30 milliliter tincture was going to last you all month. You could
mhm,
justify buying one a month.
exactly.
Versus like some of these big guys like CBDMD, like the same product we had at CBDMD, their product was like $130. Ours was like 60.
Wow.
And we were still making all the money that we needed to make. And it
Mhm,
was funny because like we're talking about this, back to what you're saying, we're talking about this. We're like, we need to make this cheaper for everybody. We need to bust into markets that aren't there because it's too expensive. Um, and then we kind of did our thing. We were doing our thing. That CBD business has since fizzled out, due to some other things out of my control. But then once our thing stopped, everybody was like, "Oh, CBD doesn't have to be for like rich people. You can buy this $20 and it's still potent, right?" And I'm like,
mhm.
"These guys, we should have stuck with it, but life happens, and it
Yeah,
is
but
what
you
it
did
is."
it though. Like you put the idea out there and
But it does,
there's
yeah. And I've had other instances,
pick it
but
up
yes,
and
that was a
run,
fresh one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, so that's I think that's kind of part of that is like being in the creative mindset is you can create something and then kind of letting go of the expectation that it doesn't have to be you. It
yeah,
doesn't have to be you that puts it out there. And there is kind of a thrill in creating something and seeing somebody else run with it. It's
yeah. I
just
like
like
that too.
yeah, it just feels it
I like
feels
that too.
nice, and that's what I really like. I like being able to help people, figure
Hmm.
out what it is that they want to do and like help them like launch into that, aside
Yeah,
from my companies where I sell physical products.
sure.
I just and
Be-
really just like women, because it's like, women supporting women is
mhm.
such a big deal, and women collaborating with women, there's some magic in that as well. And don't get me wrong,
I
I
agree. I
love
agree.
love men, but the whole this is the first time where I'm
No,
working with just women and it's like, wow, this is so different. And and I
yeah.
just love it.
I know, and so yeah, I mean, I appreciate that you said that, but one of the things that I mean, we were going to talk about was this idea of, you had mentioned, you know, bringing women empowerment, and I think that's
Mhm.
great. Like, I don't know why somebody would like, I'm a dude, but I have no problem with it because and I say this a lot, but like, obviously, I'm a feminist. I have a daughter, and you want your daughters to be like to grow up and be strong, and
Yeah,
why wouldn't she want that? So I think if you have a daughter, you should automatically be a feminist, right?
absolutely. Good
You
job,
know
Papa.
what I mean?
That is the right answer for sure. I 100%
Yeah.
agree with you. Like raising daughters is a big deal, and raising sons is a really big deal
Yeah.
too.
Well, and so what you brought back earlier, like I've had conversations, but it's just different. Like
Mhm.
I don't, so you have a coach that only works with women, and I've interviewed them, and what's awesome is I interviewed a woman. Her name's Dr. D. Franny, um, and she had a podcast. We had a great time, um, and somebody mentioned that it would be cool if I went on her podcast, and she's like, "This is a woman only podcast," and I'm like, "Right on."
That works.
That's
Yeah,
perfect. You know what I mean?
that
It
works.
doesn't mess me up. I don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's just different. Like we're just different, um, and that's
Well,
perfect. And there's some things that women need and men need that are just different.
there totally. And then also what I find when we're talking about consumables, when we're
Mm,
talking about like the health of the home, the wellness of the home, what people are consuming in the home, it
mhm.
usually comes down to the woman in the house, the
Yeah,
mom, the wife, that just the woman who's living in the home. They're typically the women. They're the people who are going out and doing the shopping. They're typically the people who are
sure.
making the decisions of like, well, you know, I don't know about you, but maybe your wife can
Sure.
just feed you whatever. And you're just like, yes, ma'am, I am going to eat this. I know my husband's that way. So I'm just like, yes, this. And he's like, yep, I'm taking this. And the
Yeah, yeah,
kids are
yeah,
you're like, mommy's going to give this to you. And they're like, oh, I have to take this. Okay, well, I guess I have to take what mom says. So it's usually the women in the household that are the decision makers on what's coming into the household, what's being bought and what's being served up to the
I agree.
family.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
so for me, that's why I want to reach out to the women, and then just to narrow
Yeah,
that down a little bit, I want to work with women who do want to feel completely whole and want to feel completely empowered and want to feel in their power and want to feel
uh-huh.
like a badass boss babe, regardless of what they're doing.
Yeah,
Even if they're just like, even if they're the stay-at-home mom, slinging diapers, I want them to feel badass doing that. I want them to have all the
yeah,
energy, and I want them to have the focus and everything that they need in their own intuition to be able to, do the things that they want to do. And so those are the women
yeah,
I want to talk to. Those are the women I want to work with and help.
yeah. And I think, um, especially in this day and age, it's like it's very confusing. And I want to ask you, just as a general question, how
Sure.
have you ever had somebody kind of come up? Because first of all, like I just want to, like, I'm a feminist. I agree with you. I just kind of want to open this conversation just to kind of get your thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever have the conversation where somebody thinks like that maybe these things are reinforcing like gender stereotypes? And how do you kind of deal with that? Because I don't
I
think they are, but I'm just curious
yeah.
if you what your conversation is around that.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I think I might live in a little bit of a bubble. I have not really had to go
Fair
up
enough.
against that too much with this particular business. But in the past, I do know that embodying the image of a strong, powerful woman, it can be very intimidating to the men around me.
Hmm.
And the way that I would approach that conversation, and what I would have to say is that I have never seen a super strong, heart centered, powerful man that hasn't had a super strong, heart centered, badass babe behind him supporting him. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
yeah,
like I
yeah.
just feel like it's to everybody's advantage to, have women be in their power, and and
I
and and let
agree.
their light shine 100%, because that's only going to grow super capable, independent, smart children, and it's only going to support, brilliant men.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. Like I said, like and I attribute a lot of my success to my wife. In fact, like this podcast would not be this far along if it wasn't for my wife, like 100%.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome. Thank your wife for me.
oh yeah,
I'm
yeah,
super
I
happy
will.
to meet her, so thank her.
Yeah, yeah. No, because I'm serious. Like for the longest time, she was a really big supporter of it, and so it's just and so whenever I go into these conversations of like because of like women empowerment and just women finding their roles, for me it's like you have to find the role that fits you and then like shine as bright as you can in that, right? So whatever
Absolutely.
that looks like, right? And I think like I don't know. I think at the end of the day, it just comes back to there's a lot of like I don't know if hate is the right word. That might be a strong word, but there's just a lot of like disagreements. Like everybody's got to be on a soapbox, and I'm just like, it's more
Mhm.
nuanced. Than it's not black and white. You know what I mean?
Nope, it's all shades of gray. And I just feel like, you know, I wouldn't be who I am today without the support of my amazing husband of 25 years, you know? I mean, he just like
Yeah.
really lets me be me and supports me in whatever crazy idea I might have. And, you know, and here's the next crazy idea. And he's like, yes, go and do that, you
Yeah.
know,
Go for it. Yeah.
and the same for him, you know, because I think when it
Yeah.
comes down to it, you know, there's no really ownership of each
Hmm.
other. You know, it's the fact is like we as a couple chose to you know, share our lives, you know, not like
Yeah.
control one another, but really to share our lives. And then when you look at people who are, you know, maybe in the corporate world or maybe have a job and have to go in day out, there's this misunderstanding that like somehow you're submitted to be like a work slave or something, you know, in reality
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I'm your employee. I'm coming here to help you with your
Oh.
business, you know, and you're helping me live. But that's kind of where it ends. It's like a partnership, and you know, we're just not seeing
Sure.
that. And I think the tide's changing, but it kind of all comes to the same thing: is that like, hey, we're
Yeah.
all in this together. We're all partners. We might as well support each other in shining as bright as we can be, and you know, trying to find our most authentic selves and
Hmm.
supporting them. And it's just
Hmm.
like, hey, you know, I appreciate that. I appreciate the vulnerability and being authentic, you know, in all
Yeah.
these
Absolutely.
cases.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny that you brought that up. I saw somebody on LinkedIn. He's like a big HR guy on LinkedIn, but he said workers, everybody compares like their work, at least like now, like we're in like this culture thing with work.
Yeah.
I've never understood it, but he kind of plays this devil's advocate, and he goes like, you know, employees at work don't want families, they want boundaries. and i was
Mm,
like and I was like, hey, okay, because I think that's part of like what you're describing, and then this little joke that he made. I think there's a lot of truth in that, and why like there's like a big employee like exodus,
mhm.
why companies are having a really hard time finding like workers, you know, just to
Well,
be able to like, you know, I think we're just done. And by the way, that's why I love sales. One of the first things I learned in sales was like, if you know how to sell something, like you can sell anything. But there might be a little bit of a learning curve, but if you know how to sell, fields open, wide open. And I'm like, yeah. So for salespeople, it's really easy to be like, I don't have to be here.
well, I think for
It's up to you.
salespeople, you know, if they know how they're going to be paid, if they know their commission, then they can choose their value and they know their
Oh
value and they know
yeah.
that they can
Oh
get out
yeah.
there and get it. And I think what we're seeing with this exodus is all of a sudden you have a huge section of the population that just realize that they're the value, they're the
For sure.
energy.
For
I
sure.
mean, they're the one, like these companies don't run without them. I think we saw like the essential workers at the, you know, they're like the grocery
Yeah.
store people. Like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
everyone's so mean to the grocery store. The people who like do the checkouts and work at the grocery store. And it was like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
none of us would have lived the last couple of years without them. And so when we talk about essential,
Yeah.
turns out the essential are the people that are getting paid at the bottom of the barrel. Man, maybe they should be
Yeah.
getting paid a lot more because it wouldn't happen. None of that would happen without them, you know? And so
I
I think
couldn't.
people are
Yeah.
starting to wake up to that. Like, wait a second, I'm the value.
Yeah. Yeah. If they don't. Yeah.
You know, and then that helps them step into their power a little bit. And when you start stepping into your power, you're able to look around and assess and, you know, decide, well, what am I going to do with this power? Because it's power. Like, what are we going to do with it? It's
Yeah.
important, you know?
Yeah. And you know what? Okay, this is kind of off topic, but I want to ask two questions. The first one, um, I th- I don't know why I didn't ask this earlier. It just came back to my head, and I'm like, I'm curious about this. So you said the part of the story was your 16-year-old son came to you and was like, "Hey, I want to use CBD. A few of my friends are using it for anxiety. What do you think?" Uh, not so much about like the CBD, but how did you build as a mother? How did you build that trust with your kids that he was even comfortable coming to you and saying like, "I want to try CBD." but I want to come to you first and like let's figure this out. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
think that's really cool.
that's
I
really,
don't know why I skipped
yeah.
over that, but
I love that.
mhm.
First off, I have to say I love being a parent. I have a 24-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old son. I am just recently, within weeks, an empty nester, and
Oh,
wow, it's so cool. But this is what I did. I mean, it started out when they were young. Um, I really feel like as a parent, we only have one job. Well, actually two jobs. And, besides the obvious, like love your kids, keep them
mhm,
safe.
mhm.
It's really just to keep them breathing, right? Just keep them breathing and
Yeah.
to just help them remember who they are. They came to this world knowing who they are, what they're about. And as a mother, I felt like my job was just to encourage them in who they are as people and support them
Mhm.
any way I can, and pump them through full of positivity and opportunities and just everything so they can develop who they are as a person. And I think through that is where the trust was. So whenever my kids have ever came to me with anything, I've done my best. I'm definitely not perfect, but I've done my best
Sure.
at being a cool head and just with whatever problem and just been like, okay, what are we going to do about it? Like, okay, what makes sense, and ask them questions and help them formulate their own game plan, their own idea, their own mission
Mhm.
on what they want to do with whatever they want to do. And I mean, I'm doing this with them since they were young, and it's just like, but you got to know the boundaries, like what's appropriate
Yeah.
for a 2-year-old is not appropriate for a 10-year-old, so you just do
Yeah.
that to the best of your ability at their level of development. And so when it came to
Mhm.
things like that, I thank you for asking this question because it makes me feel
Yeah.
really proud to be a mom. It's just nice that my son would come to me and he also knows like, oh, mom has all the good hookups. So we can, she
Sure.
probably already has like CBD sitting in the, and I didn't,
Yeah.
but
Sure,
but
sure,
he
sure.
just was like, mom, I need this. And he knew that
Yeah.
I would find him something that would be safe and he wouldn't have to worry. So.
Well, and so that's cool because it's just something that, you know, if you're a parent, that's what you want, right? I would rather my son come to me or my daughter come to me and be like, "Hey, kids are trying CBD for their anxiety. They said it's working. What do you think? Can we try it? Like, and can we both be comfortable?" And that would be way better. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And not saying that if I found CBD and my daughter didn't tell me, I'd be like pissed or anything. But you know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's the conversation you want to have.
Yeah.
You know. And so it's just really cool, and I think it's fun to bring up in a podcast like this, just to because I know that there are people who listen to this who have kids and who want that. I mean, that's like the ideal situation. You know what I mean?
Well,
Is to
yeah. I
just
mean, you think about it, like we're in these I mean, they're bodies, right? We're in these bodies, we're
yeah,
these spirits in these bodies. And what are these bodies? They're like organic, robotic meat suits, right? And so what's
yeah, yeah.
interesting about that is like you could put a substance in and you get an output on that. So it's almost like
Hmm.
you put chemicals in your body and then what comes out the other end, right? So it's almost like
Yeah,
you can fine tune and create whatever experience you want in your body by what you put into it. And I mean, yeah, CBD, definitely one thing. Shilajit, another thing. You want energy, boom, go.
yeah,
Orange, that could be programmed to any frequency. So you can program that and then take that in and like, boom, go. But we're also talking about like water, it's like
yeah,
you can drink tap water that's filled with, a lot of chlorine and whatnot. You're going to put that in your body and then you're going to have to process through that chlorine and all the things. Or, you could take the time to go find spring water and go
hmm,
haul up a mountain and fill up a water and you drink that water and you have a completely different output. Same with
oh
like
yeah,
hamburger.
yeah,
You could get the hamburger that's, from McDonald's and that's going to make you feel one way, or you can go find the hamburger from the rancher down south that,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
all non-GMO organic. The cow is named Paul. We love Paul,
yeah.
whatever, and then you eat that hamburger and you feel totally different,
Yeah,
So
I
it's just
agree
like,
with you. No, I agree.
why not let our kids know that, like right up front, that like, hey, you can feel any way you want. It just depends on what you're going to put into your body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
My
yeah. And then
suggestion
just
would
to
be, let's put good things in your body so you feel
yeah.
good. You know.
Yeah, well, and then and then it comes up, and then what I liked about that story was, that experience is you'd rather you want them to come to you, you want your children to come to you, and for me, it's like I would rather them learn it from me and get a balanced perspective than get like like a high school perspective, because
Mhm.
that doesn't usually end out very well, right?
Yeah, and yeah, it's true. And then what I found, Dalton, with this type of philosophy and parenting is it creates, you know, oh God, just like really, what is the word I'm looking for here? Like
Hmm.
sovereign
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah,
right? So it
yeah.
creates children who really kind of question any kind of authority that's telling them, oh, it should be this way, it should be that way. And they look
Mm,
into themselves and they're like, well, wait a second. I know I have this intuition, and I know that if I put whatever I'm feeling or whatever my thoughts are against my intuition, I'm going to get the answer for myself. So it
mhm.
creates like really forward thinking, independent children. And then,
Yeah.
that's what I ended up with. I ended up with these little adults that are amazing, and they're super independent and they know what they're doing. And I don't even have to worry about them in the world. And, if they have an issue, you're right. They come to me and they're like, Mom, Dad, what do you think about this? And it's just like,
Yeah.
yay.
Yeah.
And
Perfect.
unfortunately, we were not all raised that way. I wasn't
Exactly. Yeah,
necessarily
exactly.
raised that way. I had to figure that out on my own. So
Mhm.
it makes me hopeful, and it makes me wonder what would happen if like more people found a way to listen to their own intuition and their own knowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they taught their children that, like, how quickly our world would change. I
Yeah.
honestly think it would change in one generation. It'd be completely different. But
Yeah, it would be. And by the way, perfect segue into like where I wanted to kind of l- start the descent of the podcast. But you're talking about intuition. You talk about wanting to build badass boss babes. Love it. What's your biggest message to women who want to come into that and be like a badass boss babe?
well, depending on where you're at, the first thing is we all don't end up feeling this way. We're not just born this way. It's
Sure.
definitely a journey, right?
Yeah.
But the first thing is just, maybe connect to our community, and
Mm,
where we share daily tips, rituals on how to just feel better about yourself, daily
yeah.
rituals on just different mindsets, what to think, how, just how to get here, because people are
Yeah.
dealing with like layers upon layers upon layers of trauma. So you
Yeah.
got to start somewhere. So wherever
Yeah.
you're at, plug in, and we'll get you on the right track to get going where you're at. And that deals with
Yeah.
like what you're putting in your body physically, what you're feeding your mental body, your spirit, your
Mhm.
emotional body. So that's what I would say. Come join us. We're a fun group of
Yeah.
babies, and we love supporting each other. So
That's right. That's right.
yeah,
Well, that's awesome. So,
thank you.
and all the links will be in the show notes, but how do people find, your physical products? And then if, there are women listening, how do they join the women group and things like that?
So Merkabody.com is where you'll find our
Okay.
physical products. That's the easiest way. We're also in a lot of alternative doctors' offices and places around town
Oh,
at the moment.
cool.
Yeah, so that's really
Wow.
fun. Is yeah, yeah. Go into your chiropractor and they're like, "Oh, Merkabody, great, good stuff."
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
so super fun. Or you go into your lady who does your waxing, and you're like, "Oh, wow, here it is again." But yeah, easiest place
Cool.
is really merkabody.com. Also,
Okay.
merkabody.info
Okay.
is where you can join our community. And then, of course, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook under Merkabody.
Okay. Well, there you go. Well, hey, thank you so much, Bessie. I really appreciate you being here. I really
Thank you.
appreciate all the wisdom and the knowledge you brought. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed being on your show, and it's an honor to be here with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.